In this video, we're going to talk about change and why it is so hard and how you can use that understanding to help you change your entire life in a year and beyond. So we're going to talk about how change is really hard for your brain, why it is so, how dealing with change is a skill that you can develop and learn over time and you can get better at and apply across bigger change and bigger areas of your life. Then we're going to go through actionable steps that you can take to really break it down and start moving forward in the direction that you want to change in. Hi, my name is Kiara. I am a Winter Olympian who grew up in the desert, and I'm also a mindset success coach. Firstly, I want to quickly explain why change is so hard for our brains. So our brains are like super efficient, and in a way that kind of makes them lazy because they just want the easiest and least energy consuming pathway for all your neural pathways and stuff. Your brain will take those pathways. So if something's known or familiar, then it's less energy consuming for your brain to use. So it will continue to use those pathways over other pathways. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to change and adapt, and it can then take different pathways. And so you can train your brain to be familiar with being able to divert into a different pathway, and then that is not as energy consuming for your brain as it is now that it's used to taking the same pathways every time you do that familiar thing. So if you think about something that you do all the time that's automatic, but you once had to, it was once new to you, so say like driving somewhere new, you have to put it in the maps, you have to be aware of the turns, and you're like checking a bunch of things, you're more aware of the traffic, and there's so much going on with your brain, it's quite hard to get there and to focus on everything at once. The music, you normally turn down the music and things like that. And over time, your brain gets more familiar with that pathway and that road that you take, that eventually one day you just rock up to work and you're just like, I don't even remember how I got here. And so it's become subconscious, it's been put in your subconscious, and that pathway is now very easy for your brain to do. So your brain's become so efficient at so many things like this, and whether it's good or bad for you now, at some point in time, it was the best option that it had. And so it made that pathway stronger and more efficient, and so that's why it consistently takes it, and that's why it's also hard for you to make changes easily, because it wants to just take that pathway because it's going, no, fuck that change, because that's going to require me to use more energy. And so you encounter this resistance to it, and it kind of makes you like be like, why am I self-sabotaging? Why am I not able to do this? But it's completely normal, and it's actually your brain's survival mechanism. So fortunately and unfortunately, every human brain, when it encounters any change, will encounter frustration, irritation, and agitation. It will inevitably encounter these things. And so if you can reframe it to, if I experience frustration, irritation, or agitation, it's actually a flag for change. I'm in some process that's either calling me to change, or I'm in the process of change. And then you can stop and think about if it's something that you want to go through. It's not necessarily something that has to stop you. It's just a signal from your body to say, hey, I'm not sure if I want to spend all this energy. But then you can actively, consciously decide if you want to go through it or not, rather than just subconsciously reacting to all of these things and not really understanding why everything falls apart all the time. You can sort of go, oh, this irritation or this frustration or this agitation is normal, and I want to go through it. So we should also recognize that change is learning and learning is change. And so anytime you've learned something in your whole life, like you learn how to walk, you learn how to talk, you learn how to do all of those basic things, at one point in time you didn't know that and you hadn't learned that, but you developed that. And so any learning is change, and any change is learning. And so anytime you go through, big or small, a change or a learning, you are going to go through the process of change, which means you are going to, in some form, some bigger than others, but you're going to go through in some form agitation, irritation, and frustration. So the wonderful Virginia Satir, she is the mother of family therapy, and she describes change as a process. So it's a 5-step process, and it's universal. It's not one event, it is a process that you go through to change. So the start of this process, stage 1, is the status quo. That is where you're currently at. You can predict what's going to happen, you can make assumptions that have led to those predictions, and in your world, you are certain that you know the outcome of what's going to happen if you continue on this path. So for you and your brain, that is safe and that is secure and that is survival. So the status quo is where you are currently at. You have a sense of familiarity and you have a sense of groundedness no matter how awful the situation or how uncomfortable it is. That's the current status quo for you. Step 2 in the process of change is giving yourself permission to move. It actually takes a huge amount of courage to change, whether it's big or small. Recognizing that it is stepping into the unknown is actually quite powerful. Like you're moving away from who you currently are into something unknown, into something that for your brain could be a threat, even if logically or in today's world doesn't feel like a threat. That is a legitimate feeling of moving into the unknown, moving into a person that you're not sure what that's like. And it might sound simple, but you've never been where you've never been. And that's quite scary. So if you're going to change or learn something new, it's going to take you places that you currently do not know about. And that is a resistance. So that resistance is actually good. Like that's your friend. So when you get the resistance, it's sort of signaling to you that you want to live, you want to grow, you want to expand, you want something different, but you're just not sure what that looks like yet, and that's totally okay. So you've got to respect it, you've got to respect the resistance and acknowledge what it's actually telling you, because it's actually going to take a heap of courage. And so once you've respected that it's actually there, you can then gather up the courage to actually move and to actually change. The third stage of this process is actually chaos. And so in this stage, you've sort of moved past the status quo because you've put in the unknown element and you started moving towards somewhere, but you're not close enough to your goal yet that it feels sort of comfortable on the other side. And so you're just in this chaos where you're really vulnerable to get thrown off course. And this is where you experience like the most anxiety and where people will start to like fall off the bandwagon and want to go back to the status quo because it's quite uncomfortable in this chaos stage. Number 4 in the process is continual practice and reminding yourself of the change that you're making and the habits that you're building, and you're continually like forming routines and things, so it's not a subconscious thing. So you're having to remind yourself a lot of it, but it's a little bit less anxiety inducing than the chaos stage. And then number 5 is integration. So you've got the new status quo now, so you've put the routine in, it's kind of turned into a habit, and that's a new status quo for your life. So anytime you want to change or you need to change, you're going to encounter this process. You will inevitably go through this process in any learning or any change that you do. So when you can start to relate to it as a process rather than like a specific destination, you can kind of start to realize where you are on that process and not get so scared by it or get so overwhelmed and why it's not working. You just be like, oh, I'm in the chaos stage, that's why I'm getting this anxiety. Are there things that I can do to sort of move more into the practice stage or things like that? And you can really start to meet your brain where it's at. So if you're someone who just is so overwhelmed and you don't know where to start or what to change, you can just start with the smallest thing. Like that's why they say, you know, like making your bed in the morning will change your life, because it starts to build a routine into a habit into a change that shows your brain a skill of learning, of change. And so once you've done that simple task, you can then move on to something that's a little bit bigger or something that's similar and simple, and you build the skill and strengthen it, and then it can start to cross over and map across to other areas of your life where you thought you could never change. And once you put yourself through this process of change once, which you actually already have, like you've done it all through your childhood, you're obviously an adult now, and even if you don't think you're where you should be or where you want to be, you're a different person to when you were a child. And so you have gone through this process of change without even realizing it. And so you do have that skill. You do have that skill to be able to change. And that's just sort of been forced upon you by the, experience of life. Whereas now you can consciously put yourself through this process to kind of go after the life that you want. And doing it for the smaller things will build your capacity for the courage to do it for the bigger things. So you don't have to start at the bigger things. You just build the skill of learning and change, and then you can start to apply it to anywhere that you want to because you've built a skill. Okay, so if you want some action steps of how to make a change and how to start changing your life, which will make it look very different in a year from now, is write down something you want to change. If you've got lots of things, write them all down. Once you've written them all down, I want you to pick just one. Like, you can't change everything at once, and you shouldn't change everything at once. You should just focus on one thing at a time. Once you've changed that, then you can move on to the next one. So write it down, either pick the easiest one or pick the one that's going to have the biggest impact on you, or you have the biggest will to change. Because if you really don't want to change, or you can't reflect on what's going to stop you from changing, I would just pick the easiest one for now. So we're building that skill. Once you pick that one, see if it's specific enough. Like, even if you feel like you can't do it, would someone else be able to do it? Does it make sense as something to get to? Is it specific? Or is it just really vague and you're not really even sure what it means? Is it actionable? Can you put into practice things that will get you towards that goal or that thing that you want? So write down in that, what is the value in it to you? What is it about that want that you have that you find value in? Some people don't even know the reasons why they want things. Is it something that you actually want, or is it something that someone else wants? You have to determine if you're going to want it, because otherwise it's going to be something that's really difficult to change. So find the value in it for you. And it might be something that quite surprises you, and it's not actually really related to that specific goal. So sometimes you could find it in another goal, but also it help you clarify that goal a little bit more. So if you want to get in shape, you might value your health, or you might value being comfortable in your skin, or you might value playing with the grandkids, or you might value being, able to hang out with a certain group of people, or you might want to find a partner. And so you need to find what is the value in this thing that it's going to give you once you achieve that. And you can ask yourself a few times, just to get down to the more values in it. So what's important about that to me? So, what's important about becoming healthy to me? It makes me feel comfortable, it makes me feel myself, it gives me more confidence. What's important to being more confident? What's important to feeling like myself? That makes me happy, it gives me a sense of fulfillment. And so these are all values. These are things that are going to give you, number one, a little bit more motivation, but also make it clear to you whether it's actually something you want and whether the value matches up with the goal that you supposedly want. So it's a good time to check if this is something that you can control. If it's something like finding a partner and your thing is that you want to get healthy and you don't find a partner from becoming healthy, that you can see how many issues there's going to be in that and how many things that could throw you off, because it's determinant on an outside factor that's not towards you. So your motivation and your drive to it has to be something inherently valuable to you that matches that goal. These are to learn the change skills. Later, when you've got lots of ability to change whatever you want and just jump into it, it's a little bit different. But to start with, if you're trying to make smaller changes, the goals that you're choosing need to make sense, and they have to be inherently valuable to you in a way that you can get it yourself. Now break it down to all of the things that are required to make that happen. So for, say, getting in shape, you're going to have to start working out at some stage if you're not working out already. And depending on the level of current exercise that you do, you want to just start by building a routine that gives you time to get in shape. But you want to start small. So if you're not doing anything currently, then, just going for a walk or standing up out of your bed and doing one squat might be where you're at. And so one squat every day when you get out of bed is 7 squats through the week, which is 7 more than you did last week. And finding the smallest thing to build into your routine, so then you can build on that later. But it has to be part of your routine first to start, because if you go, I have to do 10 squats every day, that might not be achievable for you. You might not stick to it. So if it's not something you're realistically going to stick to, you need to be honest with yourself, then just make it easier for yourself. Like, any change is better than no change. If you go too big, then you're just going to not do it, and then you haven't made any change. So you are building the skill of change, so your brain is getting used to the process. So doing 1 squat a day every day is going to be really beneficial for your brain to start realizing how to do this process and realizing how to use a different part and the flexibility of it to make decisions and to move more flexibly. And so it's really important to meet yourself where you're at, and don't, lie to yourself about that, because you're only doing yourself a disservice, and you don't have to talk to anyone else about it. But you have to be honest with yourself about where you're at and what is realistically going to fit into your schedule. If you've already done some exercise or you already go for walking, then it's going to be something like maybe join a Pilates class or maybe go to the gym or something like that. But meet yourself where you're at. And so you form routines. So routines are conscious actions that you're going to take. They're a sequence of actions because you know what's going to happen, you can expect it to happen, and you can plug it into when you're going to do it, what's going to be the trigger, blah, blah, blah. That's a routine. A habit is something that you do unconsciously because you've done it enough in a routine that now you see the trigger, or like you have the trigger of getting up in the morning, you automatically do a squat. So that has gone into your subconscious and it has become a habit. And so habits are the things that are really hard to break, and you have to break them with a new routine, which is actually quite a lot of effort for your brain. So you're going to get that agitation, irritation, frustration. And once you get out of that, then it will create a new, different habit that then becomes easier, and that's the path that it will take. So hopefully if you use these things, you can start moving forward in the direction that you want, and you can start building habits in the direction that you want. You have to convince your brain that it's not a big deal. And so to start that thing, or that it's more desirable than not starting that thing. So a really good exercise to do is, once you've chosen your little smaller habit that you want to change, is imagine out in front of you there's 2 paths. One path is going to be you going off in exactly the same way that you're doing now. And so just close your eyes and imagine yourself 1 year from now and what your life looks like. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, if you don't make any change to your habits now. Then come back and then go off to the other path and just start with making this one change. And whatever happens, happens, but see what happens when you kind of go into, you might have to start smaller because you're really kind of having to process what it's actually going to look like. So what's it going to look like 6 months from now if you just did this one change today and started changing your routines? what would that look like? And what does that look like in 6 months? What does that look like in a year? What does that look like in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Really take the time to do this exercise and notice what you notice. And you can even look across when you get to 5 years, look across at the version of you who didn't make any changes and see what you think, see if it gives you motivation to do that thing. It's a really good way to really recognize what it is that you're changing and why you want to change it. So change is actually really simple, but it is not easy. And you need to give yourself credit for the fact that it's going to be hard and respect the process of change and the fact that you are going to have the courage to change. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. And it is a direction, not necessarily a destination. Even though you might get to your initial destination that you thought of as a person you are now, you'll notice as you start to change, that destination is going to change. So then you can do this for all your goals. See what it's like if you don't change and see what it's like if you do, but just start with one thing at a time. It takes up to, sometimes it's quicker, but up to 150 days to form a habit. So you have to stick to your routine for 150 days. That's not easy. And so trying to do too big too soon is a bit silly. So just choose one simple thing, stick to it, change the habit, change it into a habit, and then do the next thing. And you'll be shocked how that process will completely transform your life in just a year. You'll have the skill to change, and you'll start showing your brain and showing yourself that you can do it and that you do have the courage to implement these things that are going to take you in the direction that you want to go and be the person that you want to be. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully you got something out of it. Let me know in the comments if it's useful to you, and I'll see you in the next video.